Hello and welcome back to Tulsa Beacon Weekend. I'm your host, Charlie Biggs, publisher of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Tulsa's family newspaper. And joining us in studio is Jason Reese, who is a Republican candidate for Labor Commissioner in Oklahoma. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Charlie.
There may be a lot of people out there not familiar with you. Why don't you give us kind of a background of your history?
I appreciate that. I moved to Oklahoma straight out of high school. It's one of those things that I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could.
That's good to hear.
But I like to joke that I'm a fifth-generation Oklahoman. It's just that my parents and grandparents didn't live here. My great-grandparents moved here with their parents over 100 years ago.
Wow.
Went to Kingfisher County, and I still have the land grant on my wall, signed by President McKinley in 1897. So,
you know, there is a little community in Kingfisher County, I believe, called Loyal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was originally founded by German immigrants, and it was called Kiel, K-I-E-L.
Mm-hmm.
And in World War I, they changed the name to Loyal because we were fighting the Germans, you know. They didn't want people to think that this was a little, collection of enemy agents here in central Oklahoma. But that's an interesting place, isn't it?
I heard they changed the name of sauerkraut to Liberty Cabbage, too. It kind of reminds me of the Freedom Fries about a decade ago. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You study the state. I mean, there are a lot of cultural, like in Prague, which is Prague, you know, in Czechoslovakia, or the former, and it's Prague here, and Shamrock, and a lot of places there were people came for the oil boom and for the land rush.
That's right.
And they came straight from countries in Europe and formed little towns like that. But anyway, so why are you running for Labor Commissioner?
Well, I'm running for Labor Commissioner because of a previous job I held at the State House of Representatives quite a few years back. When the Republicans took over the State House in 2004, I was brought on as a staff attorney. And my job was to review every regulation passed by the state of Oklahoma, every state agency. And it's not as exciting as it sounds, but I got to do that. And my job was to read these regulations and see if they were constitutional and what effect they had on small business. And let me tell you, it will blow you away, the regulations that we have in Oklahoma and how onerous they are.
How many bills are introduced in a typical session?
Oh, hundreds. And you know, it was quite a bit of work throughout the months of November, December, and January, getting ready for a session to write all those bills. That was one of my jobs as well.
Right.
And that was also one of the frustrations, is I would have to write a bill for a Republican that I agreed with fully, and then a Democrat would come along and say, okay, I want you to write the exact opposite bill, and I'd need to do that. So it wasn't long before I needed to get out and go into private practice, and I joined a law firm based in Tulsa, though I was in its Oklahoma City office at that time. And I worked there for a few years and then struck out on my own and decided to run for office because I think our labor department right now is not being run the way it should be. I think it's in the pocket of too many special interests. And I think we as Republicans need to be in the vanguard of standing up for the public interest and the general good government principles that have not been in place in Oklahoma government for far too long.
Well, Governor Brad Henry just a few years ago said that he wanted Texas-style tort reform. I think that's what his comment was about, because we're right here next to Texas. And Texas, I think last year had a backlog of doctors seeking to transfer their medical licenses to Texas. And it's like this huge magnet. You know, teachers want to go to Texas and doctors want to go to Texas. And, you know, this is a pretty good state. I mean, up here in Oklahoma. And some of the hindrances, seem to be government imposed.
That's right. But, I can speak as someone who went against the stream in that way. I grew up in Texas, came here to go to college, met a nice Oklahoma girl, and knew I'd never leave after that. But I can tell you there are a lot of opportunities in Oklahoma. We do need to make it more business-friendly, especially for small business, so that we draw not only outsiders into Oklahoma, but also encourage Oklahomans that we already have here. We have tons of entrepreneurial talent in Oklahoma. We need to encourage them to start businesses in Oklahoma. One of the things I've said many times throughout this campaign is that when my family moved to Kingfisher County, all they had to do was improve the land and file a one-page piece of paper to get the family farm. That was the small business of the 19th century. We need to be on the side of small business now in the way that government was 100 200 years ago, and we're not. And the way we can do that is by simplifying the procedures to start and run a business.
Well, I've talked to a lot of politicians and liberals and conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, and they all universally say, "Oh, we love small business," and 70 to 80% of the jobs are created through small business. And then you look around the state and you look around at particularly large chambers of commerce, and it's lip service. I mean, I'm not saying you're doing that, but I own a small business, and there's two things that affect me directly. That is capital, and there's not much out there right now, and also regulation. I have a friend who's been on this show who owns a heat and air company with about 25 employees, and he says, "I don't work for myself anymore. I work for the government because of the overwhelming unnecessary regulation that's imposed upon from all levels of government, federal, state, and even municipal." So that's a big issue. What can the labor commissioner do about that?
Well, one thing that we can do is stop sending people up there just to add another layer on top. Everyone says that they're in favor of reform, but what they mean by that is that they just want to put another layer of regulations on top. And we never get to the regulations that have been there for decades and may have made perfect sense for an industrial economy of the 1930s when people are working 8 hours a day in a factory. We don't have that kind of economy anymore. So what I think we need to do is to go back and put an expiration date on every single regulation that we have. That way they have to come up for renewal and we have to actively pass them. So that will put the burden on keeping regulations. Right now, the burden is on getting rid of them.
Are those regulations primarily generated administratively through the department, or are they done through the legislature?
No, the regulations are generally done through the departments, through the state agencies. A lot of times they are in consequence of legislation passed by the legislature. But the regulations themselves are initiated by state agencies, and the legislature has a veto over them, which it almost never uses, though occasionally the governor does use his veto over them.
But the commissioner has the power to go in and to eliminate any of those regulations, or to adjust them, or add to them?
Well, we would need to amend them. What we would need to do is to pass an amendment to each one of these regulations, adding an expiration date on them. And hopefully we'll have a good conservative Republican governor in 2011 that will allow us to do that, because the governor can stand in the way of the labor commissioner doing certain things. And as we've seen in the past 4 years, sometimes that can actually be a good thing.
You're listening to Tulsa Beacon Weekend. I'm your host, Charlie Biggs, publisher of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Tulsa's family newspaper. And if you want the details on the $354 million bond issue the Tulsa Public Schools is presenting March 2nd, which is the biggest bond issue election in state history and more than double any other bond issue Tulsa's ever put forth. We'll have details in this week's copy of the Beacon. You can pick up copies at Tulsa area Quick Trips or call 523-4425, 523-4425 will sell you a subscription. We're talking with Jason Reese, a conservative Republican running for labor commissioner. We have the big news right now is in state government is that there is a over $1 billion shortfall in this year's fiscal year budget. We got good news this week that it looks like the oil and gas revenues are up more than we thought, so it's not going to be quite as bad. But we had Senator Gary Stanislawski from Tulsa about 3 weeks ago tell us that if the trend continued, that the 2010-2011 fiscal year, it could have they could probably need cuts up to 29% of state budget, which is that's a pretty deep cut. Senator Tom Adelson, his solution is to raise $295 million in new taxes. That's kind of a Democratic idea, is to raise taxes. The Republicans, I know, particularly the fiscal conservatives, their view is let's grow our economy on the other end of that, and instead of raising the tax rates, grow the economy, then we'll get more tax revenue, and that'll fund state government. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I would actually take a different tack. Now, not that I disagree with the Republicans. We definitely do need to grow our economy. That is vital. But we can't view that as a cure-all. We need to recognize that we are spending too much on state government right now.
Right.
Our problem is not that we don't have enough revenue. Our problem is that we're spending too much. And I would challenge everyone who's running for statewide office and every state legislator, if they're going to ask for your vote, I think that they should tell you something they would actually cut. We cannot go on like this. The good news that you're talking about is that our shortfall is only going to be